My name is Carrie Morris. I am a certified sex therapist and co-founder of Burkana Collective. We're a group practice in Greenville, South Carolina, and we specialize in the queer, kink, and polyamorous communities. And so one thing that we're going to be talking about today is ethical non-monogamy. So ethical non-monogamy 101. So what is ethical non-monogamy? So a lot of different things fall within this umbrella. So it is swinging, polyamory, open relationships, monogamish, which is a term that's kind of newer, I think, but a lot of more people are using that to describe themselves these days. And then relationship anarchy, which is, I get so many questions about relationship anarchy. I think there's a lot of different ideas about what it is. So I'm also going to talk about that today. So let's start with swinging. So swinging is a form of ethical non-monogamy where couples engage in sexual activities with others, often in a social or group setting, typically maintaining an emotional exclusivity within their primary relationships. And when we talk about sexual activities, this doesn't necessarily mean, penetrative sex. It can mean a whole gambit of things, whatever sex, means to you, whatever you put underneath that label, so to speak. So the first thing is soft swap. So this is exchanging sexual partners, but you do not have to have penetrative sex here. So some of the things could be, hey, like we're just going to be in the same room when we are playing. It could be just watching. It could be oral only. There could be boundaries around orgasms too. Like, hey, I only, want to orgasm within my primary partnership. And in soft swap, generally intercourse is only for a hierarchical partnership. And so that's someone that, is like your primary partner, nesting partner, however you kind of categorize that with your primary relationship. Then you have a full swap, which is, all of it. Anything is on the table with, of course, the negotiation of what those boundaries are between the couple. But generally, full swap does include penetrative sex. Then you have group sex. So this is any number more than two. And there's a lot of different ways that group sex can happen. Again, if we look down even underneath that, you have club swinging. So some couples, thruples, or, partnerships, they say like, hey, we're going to be, like monogamous in our everyday life. But when we go to clubs, we can have other partners, and this is adult clubs. It can be private clubs, whatever is underneath that heading. And then you have house parties. Generally, these are invite-only parties. And one thing to remember with house parties is sometimes each house party has their own set of rules. And so it is always, good if you are going to or get invited to these house parties. Hopefully, the host will kind of provide you with some of those rules, and a lot of them are centered around consent, communication, and those types of things. And so that just kind of keeps everyone on the same page. Underneath group sex, I always also put voyeurism and exhibitionism, because I think that this can be a really fun way for a couple to explore. I hear a lot of couples that maybe they're not ready to go into a soft swap or a full swap. So they do go to maybe an adult club and just, participate in voyeurism or exhibitionism. They maybe just want to watch, and that's okay. Or maybe they just want to be together and have people watch them. So that is still, a little bit of an ethical non-monogamy way to play there. So hot wifing and cuckolding, a lot of people kind of use those interchangeably. However, hot wifing is a lot of time it's, like, hey, I'm going to send my partner out. My partner is going to have some sort of sexual encounter with someone. What that looks like is up to the negotiation between the primary partners. And then generally it is a wife comes back and kind of tells their partner about it. And there's like a sharing of information. Cuckolding, generally there is a power dynamic involved in that. So with cuckolding, like it's whatever the power dynamic the partner who is watching, like wants to experience and gains out of that, like encounter. So some people, so let's just use an example of like a cisgender couple, kind of the standard, like what we think of with cuckolding, right, is a straight couple, and the man may be really turned on by the feeling of jealousy. Like they want to see their partner with someone else. And when they feel that kind of like, oh man, like I see my partner with this other person, I'm feeling a little bit jealous, like that could be something that turns them on. Can't yuck anybody's yum, and that's absolutely okay. It could also have a humiliation aspect to it, like maybe they want to see their partner with someone with a bigger penis than them, or someone that they feel like can please their partner more. And so they really are loving that more of like a submissive power dynamic in that play. But really, again, like if you find yourself being kind of attracted to one of these things, kind of starting and asking yourself, like, what do I like about that? Like what really, like turns me on in those situations. And you can even get to know yourself better and explore that avenue, and even maybe even, like build it up a little bit. And so you know exactly what you like about it. Vacation swinging. This is also another way. Maybe if couples or relationships, maybe they're not ready for something at home, maybe they want to only engage in these type of activities when they are on vacation. They go to like adult, like resorts or things like that. So, or, like, hey, let's take a trip to Portland. I know there's a really big adult club scene in Portland, Oregon. So, hey, let's take a vacation up there and explore that area of the country and really limit our ethical non-monogamy to that space. So let's keep going. I'm going to grab a sip of water. All right. So the next thing we'll talk about is polyamory. So polyamory involves engaging in multiple romantic relationships simultaneously with the knowledge and consent of everyone involved. And so there's different types of polyamory. And the first one we'll talk about is kitchen table poly. So kitchen table poly is this idea where, me and all of my partners are going to know each other. There's going to be a lot of friendship involved. There's going to be some group chats going on. Everything is really open, and everyone is able to sit down at a kitchen table together and just hang out. And this could be 4 people, it could be 6 people. It's just whatever your polycule looks like. And so there's really an openness and friendship between all of the partners. On the opposite of that is parallel poly. And so this is where folks are doing kind of their own thing. So again, like the amount of secrecy that is happening is really down to what the couple wants as far as communication. I could go on a little rant about that, but I won't. But, like well, what do I want to know? Do I want to know everything? Do I not want to know everything? Again, that goes down to negotiation. But with parallel poly, generally your other partners are not friends. We're not going to sit down and have dinner together. We're just going to make time for those other relationships to have plenty of space and to be able to grow and, function just like we do in our relationship, which takes me to polyhierarchy. So when you have a polyhierarchy, that means that your primary relationship kind of holds all the cards for you. Like a lot of the structure is, decided by the hierarchical relationship. And then a lot of the other relationships are kind of on, the side. And so there is kind of an importance put on the hierarchical relationship. Sometimes that can cause problems in poly relationships because of the communication and because you want your other partners to feel important and valued. And so some polyamorous people will avoid sometimes getting involved with a poly hierarchy. Or like if I'm in a poly hierarchy, I might go out and date and someone might decide, hey, that's a boundary for me. Like I want to be on the same level with my partners as all of their other partners. So that's something to remember too. And I sometimes get a lot of questions about that. So that might be something, if anyone has any questions, we can talk about in the comments. So then there's solo poly. And so there is no hierarchical relationship, of course. Solo poly is where generally you're living on your own. You're kind of dating, how you would like. If you want to have multiple romantic relationships, that's okay. And generally you're without a nesting partner. And so a nesting partner is just a partner that you live with. And a nesting partner sometimes happens when maybe you don't want a poly hierarchy, but you want to live with somebody, and not have to make dinner every night or, like split those bills, like in this economy, that sounds great. So, so some people do really look for a nesting partner. Hey, I want to live with someone, but I don't necessarily want a poly hierarchy. I want to share my life with you, but I also really want to share my life equally with my other partners that I really love and value just as much as I love and value you, person that I live with. All right, and so these are two, the open relationship and monogamish. Open relationship, it seems in my world, seems a little bit maybe less structured than say like ethical non-monogamy or polyamory. And so generally in open relationships, you do have a primary hierarchical relationship, but you're free to have sexual encounters or relationships with others. I think, with open relationships, negotiation is absolutely key, which we'll talk about in just a second. And so open relationships could be like, hey, like we're married, but maybe I go on business trips a lot, and so when I'm on my business trips, I can, like see other people. And when you go on vacation or when you go on business trips, you can also see other people. And maybe it's a don't ask, don't tell. Maybe it's we do want to know. Maybe we want to have kind of like a light outline of what you're doing, or maybe we want to know all of the facts. So what open relationships look like for each couple is absolutely varied. And then monogamish is, like I said at the beginning, it's a term that I've heard a lot more recently. And I think that, I don't know, my personal opinion is people are starting to see that like, maybe I do want to make room for, more experiences. Maybe I do want to just be more open to what could happen, like if I am with a partner and we want to, figure out what this might look like for us. So you might see the monogamish tag. I'm seeing it more like in dating profiles and things like that. And so generally these folks want a primary monogamous relationship, but it allows for an occasional sexual experience with others, usually under agreed upon specific conditions. However, I think some people are also using it just to let others know, like, hey, I'm not necessarily monogamous. Like, I don't know if I want one, like partner for the rest of my life. I don't know what that looks like right now. Like, I think that would really, kind of depend on what our dynamic is going to be. but just know that I'm not all the way monogamous. I'm not looking to, just be with one person. So I think that I personally think it's a beautiful term that people are using, because it kind of notes that you're going into relationships with more of a curious mind, or more of an open mind of like, yeah, I do want a primary partner, but I also, want to be open to talking about what play could look like, especially in the future when 10 years from now, we're going to be both completely different people, because people change. So maybe we want to explore in the future. It's a way to get around maybe some firm expectations in relationships. All right, so the biggie, it's a biggie for me. Relationship anarchy. I feel like this one gets a bad rap. And I get a lot of questions, well, like, what does it actually mean? And I think it's tough to define something that, has no definitions. That's kind of the crux of anarchy, right? Relationship anarchy is the practice in which people are seen as free to engage in any relationship they choose with spontaneity and freedom valued. There's often no clear distinction between a partner and non-partner. I think where this gets muddy is when there's not negotiation behind it, or there is kind of this idea, that like I have free reign to do anything that I want to do in relationships. And that's not necessarily what relationship anarchy is. So a relationship anarchy generally does not have a relationship that has one more value over the other. And so everyone sees all of their partners kind of on the same plane. And so sometimes this can even be with friendships, like I want to spend just as much time with my friends as I do my romantic partners or my sexual partners. Another thing too about relationship anarchy is you have boundaries over rules. So a relationship anarchist does not like rules, or they prefer not to have rules. And so boundaries are a completely different animal than rules. And so in a relationship where there is some relationship anarchy being discussed, or the partner is a relationship anarchist, you can say like, hey, I would prefer, like in my relationship that this thing doesn't happen. And then, like the other partner gets to choose if they want to make that accommodation or not. So I think that, you have that autonomy, you have that independence, but again, there's that mutual respect and consent of each other. And it's really breaking free from like all of the scripts that we've learned about relationships in our society. And so there's a rejection of labels. So, like you are probably not going to hear a relationship anarchist refer to anyone as like their boyfriend, girlfriend, like wife, those types of things, or even partner sometime. I think partner is kind of a wider term that's pretty accepted. But yeah, I think that, there are some people out there who, hey, I'm a relationship anarchist, and then when they go and they do something, they're like, but I told you I was a relationship anarchist. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Everything is negotiated from the beginning, and everyone has the freedom to, like place boundaries. And then it is the other person's responsibility to say like, yes, I'm willing to, hold that boundary or not. And then if they say, no, I'm not willing to hold that boundary, then it's back on the boundary maker to decide if they want to stay in that relationship or not. So again, that one, it kind of gets complicated sometimes, but I think at the end of the day, it's just really I'm not going to, adhere to these labels. I'm not going to adhere to these scripts that we've heard about monogamy forever. I want to be autonomous. I want to be independent, and I really want to love everyone and have the freedom that I want to when I love, like when I'm friends with, when I engage sexually with other folks. So that is that. Okay. So one of the things that is part of this course is you will see underneath the heading here that there is a ENM negotiation sheet. And so what this does is it goes through and it asks a lot of different questions. And so it goes over goals and desires, relationship agreements, boundaries and limits, communication, safe sex practices, consent and comfort levels, and how to make future revisions to the negotiation sheet. And so this is just a tool for you to use. You can use it as an individual or a couple. If you're, filling it out as a single individual, there may be some questions that don't apply. That's okay. You can kind of even think about it in a different way for yourself, or think about it, like in a future relationship. But how it works is it would be best if you did the sheets separately from your partner or partners. And so sit down, quiet place, kind of ask yourself these questions like, what do I believe? What do I want? What are my goals and desires? What are my boundaries and limits? Like what do I want as boundaries around safe sex? What is comfortable for me? And really, digging into yourself to figure out what your needs are, what your desires are. And then when you have this sheet figured out, like go to your partner, even plan something fun, like have a dinner together, and sit down, maybe by a nice fire. It's getting cold outside. And, like go through these and look at these questions and how you answered them. And, like your partner may have different answers than you. And what a wonderful way to be curious about your partner and learn about like, hey, like that sounds different than what I know about you, like it sounds like your desires are different than what I thought, like let's talk about that. So I'm hoping these sheets are really going to open up some nice communication and some discussions amongst you and your partner or partners. And so you can then come back together and kind of look at what you've created, individually, and come up with a plan moving forward. So that way you are on the same page, kind of literally, if you write down maybe your answers on another one. And then also discuss how you want to make revisions to the, like if you want to call it a contract or however you'd like to refer to it in the future, because people do change and desires change and boundaries change, especially if you're new into this lifestyle and you're going to go out and you're going to explore and you're going to find new things and you're going to learn things about yourself that you didn't know. And so when all of that information is being kind of metabolized, you may change some things. You may change your goals. You may change your boundaries. So keeping, like, if you do this together and then you write this, contract or negotiation sheet, it's not ironclad. It's definitely living, and you can go back to it and renegotiate at any point. So the last thing here is some resources. So these are books or podcasts that I really, really like, more than two. The Polyamory Toolkit by Dan and Dawn Williams. I think that's just cute, Dan and Dawn. That's a really nice one. It's a very short little book, and they kind of take some of the topics and bust them down, and then like Dan responds and then Dawn responds, and so you kind of have two different viewpoints there. The Ethical Slut, Opening Up, The Anxious Person's Guide to Non-Monogamy. I recommend this one a lot because some of the couples I see, are coming in and one person may, be really like, I feel like I am polyamorous. like I really need this, and the other person may have a lot of anxiety around that. That's a kind of a common thing I see in my work. And then podcasts. I love podcasts. I probably listen to more podcasts than I do read books. Don't tell anybody I said that. But you can get a lot of information on those and get some real life stories from folks that are living in these different relationship structures. So making polyamory work, multi-amory, and normalizing non-monogamy are a couple.